Welcome to Past Key. In this episode, we'll discover why Larry Flynt was attacked. The attempted assassination was the result of his investigation into the murder of JFK and the publication of the Gemstone file. The following is the article that Larry Flynt published in Hustler. The Gemstone file, with an introduction by Hunter S. Thompson's lawyer, John G. Clancy. Fingering the heartless forces responsible for the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is a commitment Hustler made more than a year ago. As a result, we're bringing you a condensed version of the Gemstone file, which was presented to us with the following warning. Everyone else who has had this information is now dead, including its author, Bruce Roberts. While this speculative report has been dismissed by some critics as an amalgam of facts and apocrypha by a paranoid researcher who died from an overdose of natural causes, we'd like you to be the judge. Roberts claimed to have been one of the crystallographers who pioneered the development of artificial gemstones later used in laser research. Withdrawn and reclusive during his last years, he accused the CIA of secretly injecting him with cancer cells shortly before his death. The document Robert left behind, which in its full form runs more than 1,000 pages, is possibly the most comprehensive and frightening probe into the JFK killing to date. This magazine has an abiding interest in shedding light on those concerts of evil that are known by the name of conspiracies. It is not just because our publisher was shot down by an unknown gunman in a small southern town and will bear the physical evidence of that cowardly act for too long. Unseen fingers pulling unspottable triggers, with silent eyes framing invisible crosshairs, are not strangers to those in public life in this country. The forces of evil that foster such things are far too evident to be a figment of the paranoid imagination. There are conspiracies. Just ask Jimmy Hoffa's son, or Medgar Evers' brother, or any member of the Kennedy family. Or you could ask Larry or Althea Flynt. Throughout history, whenever new voices become powerful and commanding, there is a traceable pattern of violent response. Whether from the right or the left, there is a stealthy, savage reaction, like a shaft of ramrod steel. From Jesus Christ to Chile's Salvador Allende, the markings are clear. Action calls forth reaction, and nowhere is this more clear than in the savage history of our own country. Abraham Lincoln, Huey Long, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and all the others whose cries for justice have been stilled by the staccato burst of the gun. These are the facts of our political life. Sudden death is not just an overtime in professional football. The article that follows, the Gemstone file, a condensation of a 1,000-page manuscript, may be considered by many to be a work of madness. But remember, through the ages, all innovative work of genius has been thought to be the product of insanity. One need only reflect on the spectacle of Galileo recanting before the church. It was madness, they said, for him to advance the notion that the earth moved around the sun. And they were right. It was madness. Even though he was correct, the astronomer's thinking was madness because it upset the settled scheme of things and could not be demonstrably proven for all to see. For that reason, Galileo's idea had to be dismissed and done away with. Perhaps just like the Gemstone file. No doubt reasonable men will say that the factual assertions of the Gemstone file are simply preposterous, because they go too far and encompass too much. That may be true, but it should never be overlooked that the hellish vision that the article contains may well bear the germs of truth, virulent as they may be. The author of this article is deceased. How he died is not known. What is known is that he was a man trained as a crystallographer who claimed to have stumbled onto a dark and murky, but nonetheless discernible interconnection between the aberrant world of Howard Hughes, the Mafia, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the United States government. He claimed that through his inventions in the field of artificial gemstone technology, the cornerstone of laser beam application, he had penetrated into the heart of the beast, that he became privy to worlds that can just barely be imagined, let alone glimpsed by ordinary mortals. His wisdom, if such it was, led, he claimed, to the death of his father at the hands of these malignant forces. His name was Bruce Roberts. In the 1950s, he lived in the Sunset District of San Francisco and began to preach to all who would listen about the evil conspiracies he had discovered. This was well before the madness that eventually took place in Dealey Plaza and in Vietnam. You, then, will be the judge of Robert's jarring legacy. Is there a connection between the deaths of popes and the flow of oil and heroin? Do forces that applaud death and disintegration over life and human progress really exist? And do they take the forms Robert postulates? Is this an incredible web of paranoid lunacy or a searing glimpse into the fourth dimension of history? We do not presume to judge the material that follows. Material we have obtained as a result of our advertisements calling for information about the JFK assassination. Nor do we intend to maliciously cast ill will toward anyone by publishing this article. We consider only this. The Gemstone file is a cry that needs to be heard. Whether or not your ears are deaf is a matter for you alone to decide. John G. Clancy. 1932. Aristotle Onassis, a Greek drug pusher and ship owner who made his first millions selling Turkish tobacco, opium, in Argentina, works out a profitable deal with Joseph P. Kennedy, Eugene Meyer, and Meyer Lansky. Onassis is to ship booze directly into Boston for Joseph Kennedy. Also involved is a heroin deal with Franklin D. Roosevelt. 1934. Onassis, John D. Rockefeller Jr., and the Seven Sisters, the major oil companies, sign an agreement. Fuck the Arabs out of their oil, transport it on Onassis' ship, and get richer. All of this is done. 1936 to 1940. Eugene Meyer buys the Washington Post to get control of the news media. Other mafia figures buy newspapers, radio stations, etc. New censorship of all major media goes into effect. 1941 to 1945, World War II. Very profitable for Onassis and the Rockefellers, Kennedys and Roosevelts. Onassis, selling oil, arms, and dope to both sides, goes through the war without losing a single ship or man. 1949. Onassis buys U.S. war surplus Liberty ships in questionable illegal purchase. 1956. Howard Hughes, Texas billionaire, is meanwhile buying his way toward control of the U.S. electoral process. He buys senators, governors, etc. He finally buys his last politician, re-elected Vice President Richard Nixon, via a $205,000 non-repayable loan to Nixon's brother Donald. March 1957. Onassis carries out a carefully planned event. He has Hughes kidnapped from his bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel, using Hughes's own men. A fake marriage between starlet Jean Peters and Hughes is arranged. Hughes, battered and brain damaged during the kidnapping, is taken to the Emerald Isle Hotel in the Bahamas. There, he is shot full of heroin for 30 days and later dragged off to a cell on Onassis' island, Scorpios. Onassis now has a much larger power base in the U.S., the Hughes Empire, as well as control over Nixon and other Hughes-purchased politicians. A Hughes double becomes Hughes. September 1957. Onassis calls the Appalachian, New York organized crime meeting to announce to U.S. Mafia heads his grab of Hughes and his adoption of Hughes's game plan for acquiring power, buying U.S. senators, congressmen, governors, and judges en masse to take control legally of the U.S. government. Onassis' radio message to Appalachian from a remote Pennsylvania farmhouse is intercepted, reluctantly, by the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover, on the basis of a tip from some Army intelligence guys who aren't in on the plan. Also 1957. Joe Kennedy takes his son John F. and John's wife Jackie to see Onassis on the shipowner's yacht, the Christina, to introduce John and to remind Onassis of an old mafia promise. The presidency for a Kennedy. Onassis agrees. 1958. Hordes of mafia-selected, mafia-purchased, and mafia-supported grassroots candidates sweep into office. 1959. Fidel Castro takes over Cuba from dictator Fulgencio Batista, thereby destroying the cozy and lucrative mafia gambling empire run for Onassis by Meyer Lansky. Onassis is furious. VP Nixon becomes White House action officer for CIA planned Bay of Pigs invasion, using E. Howard Hunt as political officer for the operation, James McCord, etc., and Cuban ex-Batista strong-arm cops, Eugenio Martinez, Virelio Gonzalez, as well as Frank Sturgis, alias Frank Fiorini, a gunrunner with a gambling background. Also 1959. Stirring election battle between John F. Kennedy and Nixon begins. Either way, Onassis wins since he has control over both candidates. 1960. JFK elected. American people happy. Onassis happy. Mafia ecstatic. January 1961. Joseph Kennedy has a stroke, ending his control over sons John and Bobby. The boys decide to rebel against Onassis's control. They arrest and jail Teamster Mafia man Jimmy Hoffa and declare the $73 million in Hughes land liens deposited with San Francisco's Bank of America as security for the TWA judgment against Hughes to be what they are: forgeries. April 1961. CIA Bay of Pigs fiasco. Hunt, McCord, CIA, Batista's Cubans, Cuban exiles, and Mafia angry about JFK's lack of enthusiasm. CIA hires Hughes' top aide, former FBI man Robert Mayhew, to act as a go-between for its Mafia contacts to put together a team to get Castro. The team of a dozen or so include John Rosselli, an expert Mafia hitman, assisted by CIA's Hunt and McCord, and others. This was reported by Jack Anderson, who gets a lot of his tips from his friend Frank Sturgis. Also on the Castro assassination team, the team tries 5 times to kill Castro. They nearly succeed, but some are caught and executed in Havana the day of the invasion. Castro survives. 1963. Members of the anti-Castro Cuban exile training team are arrested at Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana, by Bobby Kennedy's Justice Department boys. Angered, Onassis changes targets and goes for JFK, who, according to Onassis, welches on a mafia deal. JFK sets up a group of 40 advisors to fight Onassis. August 1963. 2 murders have to occur before the murder of JFK. People who could understand the situation and might squawk. Senator Estes Kefauver, whose Crime Commission investigations had uncovered the 1932 Onassis deal. Kefauver plans a speech on the Senate floor denouncing mafia operations. Instead, he eats a piece of apple pie laced with sodium morphate, allegedly a poison, and has a heart attack on the Senate floor. Philip Graham, publisher of the Washington Post. Philip had married Catherine Meyer, Eugene Meyer's daughter. Phil put together media empire as well as Kennedy Johnson ticket, and is Kennedy's friend in the struggle against Onassis. According to Gemstone, a psychiatrist is bribed to certify Phil insane. He is allowed out of the nut house for 1 weekend and dies of a shotgun wound to the head in the Graham home in Washington. His death is ruled a suicide. November 1st, 1963. The hit on JFK is supposed to take place in true mafia style, a triple execution, at the same time as South Vietnam's Ngo Dinh Diem and Ngo Dinh Nhu. Diem and Nhu get theirs as scheduled. Onassis invites Jackie for a cruise on the Christina, where she is when JFK is tipped off that Big O plans to wipe him out. JFK calls Jackie from the White House, telling her, "Get off that yacht, even if you have to swim," and cancels his appearance at a Chicago football stadium, where the CIA Mafia assassination team is poised for the kill. Jackie stays on board the Christina. 3 weeks later, the Mafia's backup and carefully arranged execution goes into effect. JFK is assassinated in Dallas. The JFK murder. Onassis's Hughes man reassigns the Mafia CIA Castro assassination team to the murder of JFK, adding Eugene Brading, a third Mafia gunzel from the Denver Mafia Smaldones family. 2 months earlier, Brading, on parole after a series of crimes, applied for a new driver's license, explaining to the California Department of Motor Vehicles that he had decided to change his name to Jim Braden. Brading gets his California parole officer's permission for 2 trips to Dallas in November on oil business, the first time to look things over, and the second time when JFK is scheduled to make his Dallas trip. Lee Harvey Oswald of the CIA, with carefully planted links to both the ultra-right and the communists, is designated the patsy. He is supposed to shoot at Governor John Connally, and he does so. Each of the 4 gunmen, Oswald, Brading, Fratianno, and Rosselli, has a timer and a backup man. Timers give the signal to shoot. Backup men are supposed to pick up the spent shells and get rid of the guns. Fratianno, considered an excellent shot, fires from a second-story window in the Daltex building, kitty corner from the Texas School Book Depository. Fratianno and his backup men are arrested, driven away from the Daltex building in a police car, and released without being booked. The Dallas Police Department was located in the Daltex building. From behind a fence in the grassy knoll area, Rosselli, armed with a rifle, gets Kennedy once, hitting the right side of the president's head and blowing his brains out. Rosselli and his timer go down a manhole behind the fence and follow the sewer line away from Dealey Plaza. The third point of the triangulated Kennedy ambush is supplied by Eugene Brading, shooting from Kennedy's left, from a small pagoda at Dealey Plaza across the street from the grassy knoll. Brading misses because Rosselli and Fratianno's shots had hit Kennedy in the head from the right and the rear nearly simultaneously. Brading's shot hit the curb and ricochets off. Brading is photographed on the scene, stuffing his gun under his coat. He wears a big leather hat, its hatband marked with a large, conspicuous X. Police have been instructed to let anyone with an X-marked hatband pass through the police lines. Some may have been told they were Secret Service. After his shot, Brading ditches his gun and walks up the street with his backup man toward the Daltex building. Roger Craig, a deputy sheriff, rushes up to Brading, assumes he is Secret Service, and tells him that he has just seen a man come out of the book depository and jump into a Rambler station wagon. Brading is uninterested. Brading walks into the Daltex building to make a phone call. He is picked up for questioning by another deputy sheriff, shows his Jim Braden driver's license, and is quickly released, without being booked. Oswald shoots Connally twice from the Texas School Book Depository. He splits through the front door. His backup man is supposed to take the rifle out of the building, or so Oswald thinks. Instead, he hides it behind some boxes where it will later be found. 3 men dressed up as tramps pick up the spent shells from Dealey Plaza. Then they drift over to an empty boxcar sitting on the railway spur behind the grassy knoll area and wait. A Dallas police officer orders 2 Dallas cops to go over to the boxcar and pick up the tramps. The 3 tramps parade around Dealey Plaza to the police department in the Daltex building. They are held there until the alarm goes out to pick up Oswald. Then they are released without being booked. In all, 10 men are questioned immediately after the shooting. All are released soon after. None is booked. Not a word about their existence is mentioned in the Warren Commission report. Regarding Lee Harvey Oswald, Officer J.D. Tippit is dispatched in his police car to the Oak Cliff section, where Oswald has rented a room. Tippit may have met Oswald on the street. He may have been supposed to kill Oswald, but something goes wrong. Tippit is shot by 2 men armed with revolvers. A witness, Domingo Benavides, uses Tippit's police car radio to report, "We've had a shooting here." A Domingo Benavides also appears in connection with the shooting of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Oswald goes to the movies. A shoe store manager tells the theater cashier that a suspicious-looking man has sneaked in without paying. 16 police charge out to the Texas theater to look for the guy who sneaked in. Oswald has been given a pistol that doesn't fire. Others anticipate that the police will shoot the cop killer for resisting arrest, but since that doesn't happen, small-time mafioso Jack Ruby kills Oswald 2 days later. Brading stays at the Teamster-financed Cabana Hotel in Dallas. Ruby goes to the Cabana the night before the murder, says the Warren Commission report. The rest, as they say, is history. Onassis is so confident of his control over police, media, FBI, CIA, Secret Service, and the U.S. judiciary system that he has JFK murdered before the eyes of the nation. then systematically buys off, kills off, or frightens off witnesses and has evidence destroyed. Unwitting cover-up participants include, among many, Gerald Ford on the Warren Commission, a Nixon recommendation, Leon Jaworski, just off the Texas Assassination Commission, who keeps the fact that Oswald had operative status with the FBI secret from the Warren Commission, CIA Chief John McConey, CIA Deputy Director Richard Helms, and a passel of police, FBI, and news media, etc.